Hello everyone and welcome back to Matchbook Flashback. I'm your host, Alec Ogg, and I've got this big collection of old matchbooks I bought at an estate sale. They're here in this big glass jar, and the matchbooks are all different colors and designs from all different times and places. But the thing is, when I strike each match, the flame begins to swirl hypnotically, and if you look into the flame, you can see a story unfolding in there, trapped like a memory in the matchbook. Well, it's summertime and everyone loves a good story in the summer, so let's dig in the jar here and grab a matchbook for today. Reaching in. Okay, I got one. Alright, this is an orange, coppery colored matchbook, and on the front flap here it says in white font, Stinchcomb Wilfdlife Refuge. Then in a smaller font below that, it says Oklahoma City Parks and Recreation Department. Oh, and on the inside flap here, it says it was printed in 2009. So this matchbook's about 15 years old. The Stinchcomb Wilfdlife Refuge is in the northwest corner of Oklahoma City, and it's full of swamps and marshes. Locals canoe and kayak the North Canadian River, which snakes through the full 1,000-acre preserve. Or you can bike the trails, walk for exercise. It's amazing to have all that wilderness inside Oklahoma City limits. But let's light one of these Stinchcomb Wilfdlife Refuge matches and see if there's a story inside. Now when I strike this match, I need you to look deeply into the flame, because that's where the story will be. Look deeply into the flame. Look deeply into the flame.
I didn't believe in Bigfoot, and now I do. And I claim, I know, and nobody else, I don't have to try to convince anybody. It doesn't matter to me whether people believe me or not. I saw Bigfoot in Oklahoma City city limits. Born and raised in southeastern Oklahoma, but after graduating from high school, I went to college a little bit and opened up my own floor covering business in Oklahoma City, which I had for 35 years. All my experiences was in Oklahoma City concerning Bigfoot. It's when my business partner of 20 years and best friend and I would kayak the river that runs through Oklahoma City, the North Canadian River. My business partner and I we liked adventure, and we would drive to some places and do some rock climbing, just amateur stuff and hikes and everything. But we were like talking one day, literally like, man, haven't you ever wanted to just have a kayak? Back then in Oklahoma, when we first started, there was maybe a handful of kayaks in Oklahoma. Nobody owned a kayak. No one floated the river. There's a place in Oklahoma called the Illinois River. It comes out of Lake Tenkiller, and that's a place where everybody goes to float. But other than that, no one floated anywhere. And we just on a whim went and got a couple blow-up rafts from Walmart. And we floated the river, and it was like, oh my God, because it was right there. We didn't have to drive to a destination, and we both had trucks, so it made it easy. We would both drive to the get out, leave a truck, and with the kayaks drive to the get in, float to the get out, go back and get the truck and go home. And it's something that we could do depending on what stretch we wanted to float in a limited time, and we didn't have to drive 3 hours or whatever to the Illinois River to go float. We could do it right there in our town. We called it night floating in stereo because of the owls and the beavers and them slapping their tails and just the nature and how it sounded. Really, it was just peaceful. It was just a getaway from life and installing tiles, and you didn't have any bills when you were on the river. And the night was it was just particularly good at night. Probably at least half of our floats were at night, if not more. And we were both family men, so I might say that. When I say night, we would do our tile work, come home at 5 o'clock, spend time with the family, grill dinner, watch a movie. Kids have to go to bed because of school time. Both of our wives were early to bed type people, and he and I were both night owls. And so you're sitting at home and you're not doing anything. And hey, let's get together and do something that's exciting and fun. And that's why we were drawn to night anyway. Some friends came into town and they wanted us to take them on a float. So there was 4 of us, and this night it was probably about 11 o'clock at night, and we float what's called the North Canadian River. It runs through Oklahoma City. I floated it pretty much 35 years. It didn't matter if it was 5 degrees or 105 degrees, we would float. It didn't matter if it was flooded, that's even better. If it was flooded at night, that got our blood pumping. So we floated this river all the time. The main stretch that we would float was from Yukon to Oklahoma City. And in that route, you float through what they call the Stinchcomb Wilfdlife Refuge. It's pretty marshy. It's overran with deer and wildlife, the owls and the bats at night and everything. That's one of the reasons why we liked floating at night. And I might say that I've never left my home in search of Bigfoot. And before this night, for 40 some odd years of my life, growing up in what they call Bigfoot country and things like that, I would refer to myself as a 10%er. I gave it a 10% chance because I'm a dude and I didn't want to be wrong if someone irrefutably got Bigfoot evidence or brought one in or whatever. So until this night, that's where I stood. There was a lot of things that happened that made me question things, but this night changed everything. The moon was out. It was a clear night. When you float this Stinchcomb, you're in an annexed Oklahoma City, but it is definitely on the outer edge of it. But you get a glow off of the city. We had a little lights, nothing big, but we never used them. We never used lights ever. It kind of ruins the experience. You're going to go at dark and you're going to light everything up. We didn't like lights, so but your eyes adjust quickly, and you have a moon glow, and you have the glow of the city, so you can see things pretty good.
Could you just describe what floating is for? There's some people that listen from outside of the country, and I just wanted to explain what floating is.
Yeah, it's in a kayak, and I've floated pretty much in every type of boat that you can imagine. But kayaks, you can float on the river, single person kayaks with a paddle, a long paddle that has a paddle on each end of your oar. So you paddle left, paddle right, paddle left, paddle right. And if you're not paddling, and this is what happened, if you're not paddling, and if you're not talking, and if you're just floating with the flow of the river, you are a piece of driftwood at night. You are completely 100% stealth. And my late wife was beside me, and the two people that was with us was behind us. And it's 11, it's dark. We kind of lost track of each other, and we didn't know if they were 50 yards behind us or a half a mile behind us. So we had stopped paddling, and it was just a real light flow of the river. And so it was just gently bringing us forward. Well, none of this was by chance, but we wasn't paddling. We was just listening to the owls and the night, basically. We wasn't talking. We wasn't moving around and fidgeting. And again, all this wasn't by plan or anything. I was about 12 to 14 feet from the bank, floating in the middle of the river. My wife was skirting the bank. She was right beside the bank. It was a sharp drop off, and kayaks need very little water to float. And so she's skirting along the bank. I'm looking to my left. She's to my right. We're not paying attention to one another. And up ahead of her, what has been relayed to me was a dark, big object in front of her. And she took it as it was a bush on the side of the river. So when she got closer, she pulled her paddle away because it extends way out, over the bank area. And she didn't want her paddle to get caught up in this bush. So when she moved it was the only noise outside of nature that happened, and it made a scratching noise across the top of her kayak. Well, when it did that, the bush, which ended up being a Bigfoot drinking from the river, jerked its head to look at her, and then they literally locked eyes. They were in touching distance from one another. She gasped really loud, and that's what got my attention, and I jerked to look her way. As I was doing that, she jerked to look my way, away from the Bigfoot. Her eyes was like wide open like platters, tears coming down her face. This all happened in a flash. I still do not know what's going on. So I'm hollering at her, what is the problem? What is going on? And she couldn't utter a word. Well, while I'm saying what, it stood behind her, because like I said, it was right beside her. It stood behind her straight up, looked at me over the top of her, took a quarter turn, took a step, took another quarter turn, took a step, disappeared silently into the woods. The emotions going through me was by the dozens. There was the moment when he was standing over her, and I say he had whatever. that I was so helpless. Like, there's my wife, and I can't do anything about what's next. Then I was in awe, scared. It was like a rush of all the emotions. And and that's a Bigfoot, man. Uh, it was a crazy, crazy, life-changing deal. But back to where we was, then I just started pounding her with, "You tell me what you saw. You was so much closer. It's dark. I could only see what I saw, and I need you to fill in the blanks, please." And she was so shaken that she couldn't talk. I mean, it seemed like 30 minutes, but it was probably like 5. When she could talk, she relayed thought it was a bush, moved her paddle. When it scratched, it locked eyes with her. And she described its eyes as orange, coppery, looked orangutan-ish. Look one up. She says that's exactly what its eyes looked like. And their eyes were locked, you know, within 3 feet. I mean, it was unbelievably close. But other than that, Harry, huge. She jerked away just as soon as they locked eyes. She jerked away and looked at me, and she was so terrified she never looked back. She never saw it stand. And actually, for the rest of our time together, she always referred to it as Littlefoot because she only saw it crouched and drinking from the river. Now, people always want to know, how big was it, how tall was it, all of that, and I know all the 8, 9, 10, whatever, 15-foot tales and all of that, and I don't discredit any of those. My experience, what I saw, and me being a tile man for over 35 years, I carried a tape measure with me every day. I know measurements, and sometimes, most of the time, I don't need my tape measure. I can tell you what height or what distance something is. What I saw was about 6'6", give or take a couple inches. And I would say more take. So it might have been 6'7", 6'8". I just stick with 6'6". And this thing must have weighed 500 pounds. It was enormously broad chested and enormously thick. But at the end of the day, it stood silently, took 2 steps, and was gone. Now, people say, well, what if that was a guy in like a ghillie suit or something like that? Back then, and I say back then, it was probably 15, 16 years now ago. In this Stinchcomb Wildlife Refuge, there's no motor vehicles in, no motor vehicles out. You got to want to be to be where you're at. If you haven't kayaked in or floated in and you try to come across land and carrying equipment and stuff like that, no. And in places like this, sometimes the mosquitoes there's so many that you can hear a light hum in the air all the time. So you would be ate by mosquitoes. You'd be in a ghillie suit. And then I tell people, I wouldn't put it past someone to dress up and pretend to be a Bigfoot. I know people do that. But in this case, on this river, at this time, no one floated this river. I told you when I started here that I floated it with my partner at 105 degrees or 5 degrees, and we floated it every single week. We saw no one. If anyone else tells you they were out there floating in those years, they're liars. So if it was a man in a suit, he was shooting extremely long odds that someone would float by at 11 o'clock at night. And then what was the joke? If he'd have yelled and screamed and hollered, I'd have peed my pants and fell in the river. My wife would have fainted and fell in the river. But it silently stood, turned, and we was close enough that it wasn't a man in a suit. We can promise you that. And in the 35 years of floating it, that was my one and only eye sighting of a Bigfoot. Now, there's several other things that happened prior to that and just after that that really solidifies the whole Bigfoot story in this area. But, one of those being floating on the river and on the bank seeing 8 dead deer in the same exact spot, one at a time, but see one and then 6 months later see another, and then maybe a year or so later see another, and all of these 8 being in not in the exact same spot. One was, it was over there, and one was, over there. No, in the exact same spot. So when I was seeing these deer, and this was before my sighting, I wasn't seeing deer and going, a Bigfoot killed that deer. I was seeing deer thinking poachers. Then I would think, why did they leave it here? So I saw a couple, and the first one was, mutilated, tore up, and I just thought maybe coyotes had got to it or something. The second one, I got out because I was curious. It was a big doe, no sign of blood, no sign of any bullet or arrow wound. So I reached down and grabbed her hind legs to turn her over and look at the other side, and it was just snap and crackle and grinding, and her back legs was broke, each one of them probably 5-6 times. I mean, shattered. And there was no bullet wound or no arrow wound on the other side, no blood except a little in her mouth. And so I started feeling her head to tail, all the bones, back, ribs, front legs, back legs, all of them were broke. So you can take that for what it is. I can promise you one thing, it didn't get hit by a car and drug to this spot. And that didn't happen 8 times. Something killed it in a brutal fashion, but not making it bleed, not like biting it and tearing it up and killing it. I was on Finding Bigfoot about this whole deal. They came and spent a week there, and I hung out with the producer and stuff for a couple weeks and showed them this area and where it happened.
Bobo, Cliff, and myself are on our way to meet Jim McDonald. He was the witness who came to the town hall meeting and talked about kayaking down the Canadian River at night, and there was a large, dark, Bigfoot-looking thing right there on the bank. What's interesting about Jim's incident was that it was in the Stinchcomb Wildlife Refuge, and this is on the river that goes right through the middle of Oklahoma City. So we're about as close to a big city as a Sasquatch is ever gonna get.
My sighting was just down the river on this side, and the only way that you can get to it is by kayak. I know you guys are ready for action. Let's jump in the kayaks and go down.
We'll follow you.
All right.
We are not far from downtown Oklahoma City, but yet this area is wild. It is a thick jungle of tangled rose bushes, willows, and trees on all sides. Life is abundant here. Just floating down the river, I've seen dozens of turtles, several snakes, and lots of birds.
Right here is the bank where my late wife and I saw our sighting is right here.
Let's check it out. So this is the exact spot where it came up and disappeared into the woods?
Right here. We was floating, and it was on the river's edge right there, rose up, turn, and disappear right into the woods right there.
When you laid your eyes on this thing, what did you think it was?
I thought it was a Bigfoot. Black, hairy, about 6'6", and insanely over-the-top broad. It would be like if Bobo and I was standing here together.
Yeah?
That's how broad.
And during my time with the Bigfoot people, which I'll just say I wasn't pleased with the episode and what they put out. But during my time with them, Bobo, I was telling him this story about finding these deer. And then, so I was curious after that. When I would see them after that, I would get out and check them. A couple of them were mutilated, but about 4 or 5 of them were in the same condition where it was just the broken bones, no blood other than the mouth. Bobo told me that he had heard several interviews with people where they had actually saw a Bigfoot ambush a deer, snag it by its hind legs, and swing it like a baseball bat up against a tree over and over and over until it killed it. And in my mind, that explains it 100% of what I saw. And I'm going to say that I've killed several deer in my life and been around them, and I have no explanation for what I saw other than that. And that's the only thing that makes sense to me. And then seeing the Bigfoot just solidifies it. But after my wife passed away, I floated the river with several different people, but a couple girls floated it with me. And we had rocks thrown at us that were larger than any human could ever throw. And I mean, hurled through the woods, where we knew it was coming because we heard the clicks of the limbs as the rock was coming out of the woods, flying right at us. The clicks from the limbs kind of told us that they were coming, got our attention, got us to look that direction. Both of them was at night, so I can see anybody question what I'm saying. But beaver, if anybody's heard a beaver slap its tail, it's pretty daggum loud. Now, it's a slap, but this is a big rock being thrown. And when it hit the water, it was, like a people, guys or whoever knows that jack around around waterways or a bridge over a waterway, and they want to throw a log in or a big rock in, the thump that it makes when it hits the water. But one girl I was dating, it literally hit within a foot of our kayak, and I can promise you it would have killed her, broke whatever it hit. Things would have not been good had it hit her. My other girlfriend I was with, that the rock got thrown at us, she had never floated at night, and she was like, man, I know your Bigfoot stories, and let's do something exciting. Let's go float. So I took her on a float, and we saw a snake, and I thought, oh, this is over. And she said, no, let's go on. And a beaver came by and slapped his tail, and I thought, she's gonna get freaked out. No, let's go on. Snake dropped out of a tree. None of that deterred her. But then the rock got thrown directly at us, and that's the only time that I reacted to what was happening. And I screamed at it. And after I did that, just a loud, deep scream at it, straight at where the rock came from. And we heard nothing. Everything just went completely silent. But someone says, why they throw rocks at you going down the river? Why would they do that? Well, if people press me on that, my theory that I've developed could be completely wrong. But with the 8 dead deer and what Bobo said, which I'm not a fan of Bobo, I'll just tell you, but what he said and everything, I think they've got a rock and they're hiding behind some brush or a tree or something like that, waiting for a deer to walk by. This place is overran with white-tailed deer. And when the deer goes by, they ambush it and pummel it with a rock or whatever. Well, the night my wife and I saw one, we were silent. But the night that these rocks got thrown at us, believe me, we weren't silent. We were yucking it up, laughing and paddling and stuff like that. So in my mind, the Bigfoot's hiding out, waiting for a deer to come by, and we just screwed up his hunting. And he gets mad and, like a child, out of frustration or whatever, throws a rock at you. And right or wrong. That's my theory. Then there's also, beside the Stinchcomb, another thing to back up the whole area. There's a guy that has a place on his property where he has done a crude cutout of a metal Bigfoot. And I mean crude. It's not your typical arm swinging, commercially sold one. It's a custom one that he's done. But I've never talked to this guy. No one's ever interviewed this guy. But it's painted black with a red kill sight on its chest and shot like 200, 300 times. So this was the land adjacent to the wildlife refuge. And this guy definitely had it in for Bigfoot. And, you know, my question is, if he hadn't had any experiences, why wasn't it a bear? Why wasn't it a boar? Why wasn't it, anything other than a Bigfoot cutout? So that's pretty much my story, other than, just the odd things that happen there. And I might also say that I floated the North Canadian River from Calumet, Oklahoma, below the dam, all the way to Lake Eufaula, every stretch of the North Canadian River. And that's cumulative several hundred miles of river. And I only have Bigfoot stories, 35 years of floating it in a 2-mile stretch that goes through the Stinchcomb Wildlife Refuge.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
Could I ask you a couple follow-up questions about these particular encounters?
You bet. Yeah.
What time of year was it?
Most of my experiences through that 35 years, most of them happened in the spring.
Okay.
April, maybe Aprilish, May, April. It was, and I just theories, maybe it's a migratory deal or something. I don't know. And it seems to me, and I'm no expert, never claim to be one, but it seems to me like they travel the rivers. So take that for what it is. And there's the place that I saw this. There's other people that have saw things and tracks and women that walk around this lake on a walking track that saw one rummaging through a trash can. So there's been reports where I saw this forever. I didn't know any of this until after my experience, but at any rate, a lot of history of it happening right there. And
hey y'all, this is Alec cutting in. I was curious when Jim mentioned that there had been a history of sightings there. I went on the BFRO.net, which is basically a place where people can submit their Bigfoot sightings, and you can look it up by county. So I went to the Oklahoma County, where Oklahoma City is, and there was one labeled from 2019, Hiker's Dusk Sighting in Stinchcomb Wildlife Refuge, OKC. But I clicked it and I want to read it to y'all because it supports what Jim said about there being other encounters there. So this was in April of 2019. And under location details, it reads, "When I lived in northwest Oklahoma City, I would frequently take evening walks at Stinchcomb Wildlife Refuge. The preserve is roughly 1,000 acres located on the suburbs of Oklahoma City and Yukon, adjacent to the Wiley Post Airport. Beginning from the parking lot at the end of Northwest 50th Street, the maintenance road will take you 2.5 miles upriver to the Kilpatrick Bridge, where the North Canadian River enters the reserve. However, the city only maintains the trail to the remote communication building. From there, the trail becomes overgrown in the summers. The park is typically visited by local neighbors, bicyclists, horseback riders, and dog lovers. The nearest town is Oklahoma City, Oklahoma." Now here's the observation. It reads, "This evening I decided to venture past the communication building as the foliage was still at ease. I continued another half-mile up the path to where the power lines cross the river. From here, the riverbank drops 15 feet, giving a nice view of the river below. As I approached this area, my eyes were immediately caught by someone down below at the river's edge. What I saw was an all-black figure down at the river's edge about 250 feet away. I thought it was strange because not many people hike off-trail into the preserve during the summers, nor late in the evening or even past the communication building. As I watched this, quote, man, unquote, down at the riverbank, I started to notice subtle details like golden red hair in the sunset. I also didn't notice any distinct clothing, but hair alone. At this moment, I remember being very confused as to what I was seeing. Whoever was down at the river began to walk inland, using its arms to move the reed bushes. Then I saw its long hair dangling from its arms, shoulders, and hands. Oh my God, it's Bigfoot, I thought. I immediately began to reach for my phone without taking my eyes off the creature. That is when it noticed me. What terrified me the most was I was not able to make out any details in the face as we made eye contact. That is when I ran. I continued to run until I met a couple with their dog back at the communication building. I will never forget the look of confusion on their faces when I came sprinting around the corner. I wanted to tell them about my experience, but I continued to run as I thought they would not believe me. The following day, I returned to look for footprints, but was unable to venture into the overgrown foliage. The experience was not enough to scare me away completely. Instead, I was more cautious of the time of day and surroundings. I continued to exercise in Stinchcomb until I moved to Arizona in July of 2019. That's the end of me reading that encounter, but there's some more details in the post, so I'll link that in the show notes. And if you're wondering about the legitimacy of that post, I don't know if this will help you out, but the BFRO.net is actually run by one of the former hosts of Finding Bigfoot, Matt Moneymaker, and he commented on this post and said, "I spoke with the witness, Chase Collins, by phone. He now lives in Arizona and works as a night auditor at a local resort." And he goes on to explain the details that Chase told him over the phone. So someone at least talked to this guy and deemed him credible. It's not just a creepypasta as far as I know. But I wanted to read that to y'all because that detail that they couldn't see the face, but they knew they made eye contact with it, enough to scare them to run away, that detail really creeped me out, so I wanted to include it in the episode. And now we're going to go back to Jim, and he's in the middle of talking about the show, Finding Bigfoot.
I was catering for them one night, and we were all just laughing and having a good time. I said, "Hey, you know something y'all haven't done?" And they said, "What's that?" And I said, "You haven't gave anybody a polygraph test." And they all just like, I mean, they were shocked. You could see it all in their head. And they were like, "No, we haven't. What are you saying?" And I said, "Hook up a polygraph test with the police department." I said, "I'll take it. I'll pass it. No problem." And they were like, "You'll pass it, huh?" And I said, "Yeah." They said no one in 3.5 years or whatever had ever offered that. So they was a little taken back. And I said, "I'll go one further, set it up. I'll take it. And if they make you pay for it, you pay for it. If I pass, I pay for it if I fail." And they were like, "Damn, we're calling tomorrow when we're going to try to do this." Well, it never happened.
You saying that makes me think how great of a show that would be if everyone got polygraphed. It would make...
Yeah, because I told them, I said, you put donuts in the wood, you blast rock music, you put a monkey in a cage out there, you got blessed by a medicine man, you ain't gave anybody a polygraph. That's exactly what I told them, word for word. I wasn't a big fan or anything before the show or anything. Bigfoot interested me, but it was just one night. I'd had a couple of beers and I had never watched the show before, and I was watching it and I was like, man, I'm passionate about laying tile and smoking meats and catering. These people are obvious, me not knowing A from Z, but these people are seem awful passionate about Bigfoot. I'm just going to call them and tell them my story. Well, that Matt Moneymaker called me back the next day and said, "We're coming to Oklahoma." And I was like, no, you're not. And he said, "That's an incredible story, Jim." He said, "We're coming to Oklahoma. I'll send my producer out a week ahead of us, and then we'll come in and we'll be there for a week after that." And it happened just like that. And it was just me not thinking anything of anything, just calling and, hey, telling these people that are passionate about Bigfoot my story. And that's what all happened after that. So they didn't go find that Bigfoot cutout. Well, hell, I can take you right to it, or I could as of a few years ago. And I was like, interview that guy, man. Ask him why he made a Bigfoot cutout. They just didn't really go with it. So
Yeah, well, Jim, I think you'd be a better producer than whoever they had. But
appreciate that.
Sorry to dig so deep into finding Bigfoot. I was curious, do you have time to tell me about your Dogman encounter?
Briefly, I do, and it is a brief story. It was late at night, and admittedly, neither one of us were drunk. We had both had a couple drinks, and coming home from listening to some friends play in a band, and I was going to Newcastle, where I lived at the time, and on a back highway, a little small one, and the girl I was with, just a friend of mine, was driving, and I just leaned up against the passenger side door and had my eyes closed, and heard her gasp real loud, and I jerked up to see what I could see, and over the hood, right in front of us, going 60 miles an hour, there's a hunched Dogman. And at the time, and for years after this happened, I had no clue of what the term Dogman. I had never heard of it. Didn't even know there was one. But it was right in front of us, and we're going 60, and there is absolutely no way we're not about to smash this thing. It was a hunched over 5.5 to 6 foot tall, super long ears. Its mouth was open and fangs and glistening teeth. Its claws and fingers were long and crazy looking. It was a whole different experience than Bigfoot. It was absolutely terrifying. Well, she braced for impact, and this all happened in a flash. She braced for impact. I braced for impact because we're about to hit a large ass animal. It passes straight through us. Let me back up and clear that out. It doesn't move. It doesn't flinch. It is dead center in the truck. And it goes through the truck and through us and out the back end and disappeared. That's why I will say in any of these groups, Dogman, Supernatural, Bigfoot, Flesh and Blood, because those are my experiences.
What color was it?
Dark black.
Could you see its eyes?
Oh, yeah. Big, black, white around them, as best I could say. Ears like insanely tall. But after it passed through, she started screaming at me, "What was that? What was that?" And I was like, "Oh my God, what did you see, Summer? What did you tell me what you saw?" She was like, "Was it a panther on its hind legs? What was it?" I said, "Panthers don't have ears like that, man." And she was like, "What was it, Jimmy? Tell me what it was." I said, "Man, what I saw looked like a naked werewolf or something with a snout. It went long ears." And she said, "Exactly. That's what, like a wolf." And I was like, "Exactly." And, and neither one of us had ever seen a picture or heard of Dogman or anything at the time. And then we just, from time to time over the years, we will say a little joke about it or something, but insanely unusual, to say the least.
Yeah. How were the arms kind of suspended?
Long, spindly, and elbows down, hands up.
Kind of like a Velociraptor, T-Rex kind of
exactly. Yeah,
dinosaur pose? Okay.
Yep.
I know this was just a split second, but did you notice if it had dog feet or human feet?
Well, it didn't. No, but its front was fingers,
Okay.
fingers and claws, and it was thinnish. Real thinnish. It wasn't this superhero Dogman that people like to do renderings of or anything. It was muscular and thin and crouched, bent over, hunched over.
When you're bracing for impact and the truck is going right through it, do you still see it as it passes through the hood and
No.
into the cabin and back?
No, maybe just to the cab. And it wasn't like ghostly. It was full figured. Like I said, it didn't look ghostly. And then we saw it come maybe past the bumper into the hood. And then after that, the best I can describe it, and I've told a couple friends and other people, it was just like a swoosh. It was like a swoosh. And that was it. I mean, that was it. We saw it to almost to the hood, to the front glass. And then after that, it was just kind of almost like a swoosh of air.
Man, that's crazy.
Yeah, it was wild. And they say that there's some native burial grounds around there, and I've heard rumors since then that they protect those and things like that. And I have no theories or no anything, no other stories or lead ups to that, or it's just something that happened to me. I'll just say, I would have a hard time believing it if I didn't experience it. Anybody else told me that story, I don't know that I would bought into it at all.
Well, as you can see, the match has gone out. And as the smoke clears, I feel like I can still smell that cool air coming off the new Canadian River that night. Unfortunately, I can still hear the hum of the mosquitoes as well, but those are coming from outside in my backyard here in Memphis. But I hope you enjoyed those Bigfoot and Dogman encounters as much as I did. And if you did like it, do the show a favor. Text a link of this episode to a friend who you think might enjoy it too. Maybe you got family down in Oklahoma, send it to them. Give them something to talk about around the campfire this summer. Because the best way to support Matchbook Flashback is by telling a friend about it. Word of mouth. Another great way to support the show is to give us a 5-star rating. Spotify or Apple, wherever you listen. And if you're listening on YouTube, go ahead and subscribe. But thank you so much for being here. I can't stress enough how much it means to me that you're listening. And I hope you come back next week because I have another match to light.